Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this study, either real time or later on when it's being recorded and sent out. Just appreciate that you take the time and pray that it is a blessing into your life today. So we are picking up on Judges chapter 17. We finished the 16th chapter last week and saw that Samson's life had come to an end. And so now we pick up with some interesting, we'll say, intermediate spots between the major judges and the minor judges, and we see some really interesting characters. And today is really fun one for starting there. So the story takes place, if you're looking at the map here, in the land of Ephraim. We don't know exactly the location, it's kind of vague, but we do know that the tribe of Dan is involved. And so the tribe of Dan, you can see, is located just to the south and west of Ephraim. And so Dan is actually where Samson came from. And so this story of what we're going to read today seems like it's kind of obscure and seems like, okay, why are we reading this and why is it there? But hopefully we can show you a few links as to why this story is where it is and what it hopes to teach us. So remember the location, remember the two tribes of Ephraim and Dan. So first of all, it starts out in verse 1 that there was a man of Mount Ephraim whose name was Micah. Now, Micah is also the name of a person who wrote a book of the Bible. There's a book called Micah. But what's interesting here is what you see translated as Micah is not really his biblical name. I just switched the screen to Bible Hub, and looking at the actual Hebrew, you see his name is pronounced Michayehu. And so it is translated as Micah, which is somewhat of a shortened version. And of course, that really causes our interest to be piqued, is why did they change his name from Micah to Micah? Well, the word Micah means who is like God, and using the form of Yah for God, meaning the one true God of Israel. So what's about to happen here is you're going to find that this guy is not aligned with the one true God of Israel. He's aligned with everything else. And so maybe that's why his name was shortened to take away some of that connection, because again, this is going to be a crazy mixed up story. And it all starts with the guy's name, which makes it you think that he's going to be a very righteous guy connected with the one true God of Israel. And it's going to be a really fun story of encouragement and uh, enlightenment. And it's anything but that. And so maybe the translators were trying to just uh, preserve the dignity of his real name and give you a nickname. So that's how we start. So here's how it goes. So we get to verse 2, and he says to his mom, again, this is changing the story so abruptly from the story of Samson into this man, Michayehu or Micah here. And he says to his mom, there's 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and you issued a curse, and you spake this in my ears. And here the silver is with me, I took it. And his mom says, blessed be thou of the Lord, my son. And you notice the Lord is in these capital letters, meaning Yahweh. This is a really bizarre sentence. Okay, what is happening here? So to really see that, again, we take a look at what the Hebrew tells us. And the other thing to point out, what stands out, is 1,100 pieces of silver or shekels of silver is the exact same price that was paid to Delilah for Samson's betrayal. And we're going to find this is a very large sum of money. So the Jewish sages and sources put this connection together and say, okay, what's this woman doing with 1,100 pieces of silver? Who was the last woman that we knew who had just been given 1,100 pieces of silver? So they say, possibly this is Delilah, that this story is carrying over from Samson, because this woman is Delilah, and she obviously has a son that was named Michayehu or Micah. And so, again, very interesting um, why she named her son that way, why she um, is calling on the name of Yahweh. You see that at the end of verse 2 here. And so, unpacking this a little bit, we kind of put these pieces together that it could be that she had a somewhat of a impact or was impacted by Samson. Maybe it caused her to turn from her idols to the one true God. But again, she wasn't really living in a place where she could um, come and know God in a way that we would have liked to seen. So it seems like she's kind of mixing things together. That obviously, she has somewhat of a knowledge of God that she could call upon His name. She also had a knowledge of spiritual things because it says that she put a curse on whoever stole her money. Okay, again, many questions here. Why was her son allowed to take her money? How old was her son? It doesn't seem that he lives at home. We're going to find later on that he has a son, so he appears to be, in his 30s or 40s for years of age. What we don't know is how much time has passed from the episode with Delilah until now. We do know when we closed out last week's chapter that Samson had been a judge for 20 years. And so, was he in his 40s when he met Delilah? Was she in her 40s? Um, Again, all of this, we really don't know. We just know that this story fits in somehow. And so she had a knowledge of God. Her son stole 1,100 shekels of silver, which was a huge amount. She put a curse, and it says that he heard it. And this is what's really interesting. He says that this saying was in my ears. So what we deduce from this is he felt guilty. He was feeling that, okay, mom put a curse on me. I'm in trouble. Something bad is going to happen. Again, they're very superstitious and took these type of things very seriously. And so he wanted to try to make things right and return the money to break himself from this curse. Now, according to the Jewish sages, what they said is once a curse was issued, she couldn't undo it. And so what she tried to do was counter it with a blessing. And so she blesses him in the name of the one true God of Israel, of invoking Yahweh's name for meaning mercy to come and benevolence to come from God. So she's hoping that by saying this, that this blessing by Yahweh will overrule the curse and protect her son. So it seems like everything is going back to the way intended. Things are a little bit happier, and then things just start getting really weird. We look at verse 3. After he had restored the 1,100 pieces of silver, what does mom do? Instead of, does she praise Yahweh? Does she, what does she do? She says, "Oh, I'm going to make a graven image. I'm going to make." She goes, "I've wholly dedicated this silver unto the Lord." Again, you see it's um, capitalized, and when we look at the Hebrew, it is using the word Yahweh, that she dedicated this silver to Yahweh. What's interesting here is, what does this term dedication mean? Um, we use it so often in religious spheres. We use words like sanctified and dedicated. And so let's just see what she was thinking. So we open up in our Bible Hub this word for um, set apart or consecrated. And it is the word kadosh, which is a form of where we get the word holy from in Hebrew. And so it's used and translated in many different ways. You see the Bible in the NASB version takes this same word, and most of the time it's consecrated. but it's manifest in holiness, it's purified, it's set apart. And the true understanding of to be holy or to be consecrated means to be set apart, means that it has a unique purpose and it's not used for many, many purposes. And that is the root idea of what it means to be holy. It means to be dedicated, means to be consecrated, is that you have a specific purpose either for yourself or for um, an item, such as the case here, that she had a specific purpose um, for this silver that she was going to dedicate it to the Lord and Yahweh. But yet, by doing so, she was going about this in a way that obviously was not condoned by the Torah, by the Bible that has been given. Remember that Moses had received the Ten Commandments. He received the first five books of the Bible called the Torah, and this set up the tabernacle plan. The priests were going on, but here she's in a place that she's pretty much out of touch. She's oblivious or not involved in the tabernacle. She didn't run to one of the priests and say, "Oh, what should I do now?" She's kind of doing her own thing. And again, we're going to see this as a theme going on. So, in her kind of warped way of wanting to serve the one true God of Israel, she's going to go and make a image. Um, a little bit of a tidbit here. It says it make a graven image and a molten image. It makes you have the thought that there are two images here. We're going to find later on that there's really only one image that was made, and that in the Hebrew it breaks it down a little bit better and said this is a carved image and a molded image. So the understanding that we get is that first they started with an image that was carved out of wood, and then they molded silver, molten silver over the top of it, kind of like a gilding over this image. So that's where the words get a little mixed up between what's carved and what's molded. And so this, we understand, this was an idol of wood, then covered over with silver. It wasn't solid silver. And then verse 4 is also kind of interesting because there is a um, repeat of what has happened. He restored the money to his mom. Mom took 200 of the 1100, which means there's 900 left, and gave them to somebody who was a image maker, and he made this molten image. And whose house does it go in? It goes into Micah's house. This guy seems to be a very religious person, because he was certainly well equipped. You get to verse 5 that Micah had a house of gods. He had an ephod. You remember we talked about that in some lessons back. He had a teraphim, which is a word we're going to take a look at. And then he consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. So he's taken one of his younger kids and setting them apart to be a priest in his own little homemade um, tabernacle or homemade idol shop. Again, quite strange. So, but it does show that he had a spiritual side. I guess I want to give him that much credit, that he was pursuing spiritual things and let's try to get a handle on what he was actually doing. So going back to Bible Hub, take a look at the Hebrew here, and it said he made a shrine. It's the word beit, which is house, and it's a house for Elohim. Elohim can be used to describe the one true God of Israel. Many times it's used that way, or it can be used to describe other types of gods. And the Hebrew doesn't tell you what it is. You have to gather it from the context. The translators obviously knew that this wasn't the one true God, so they did not capitalize the G in the word gods. So he made this little house for all his trinkets and things, and in it he had an ephod. If you remember, we looked at what an ephod was back in some previous verses, and we really don't know. The origin says it's from an unused word. It's used 49 times in the Bible, and we think it's a robe that the priest wore, kind of like a special robe that you wear to show that you're doing these religious things. Again, we can relate to some of this. We have in many churches special robes that um, priests wear and men of religious power wear, who are doing services that wear special robes and sometimes special hats, sometimes special sashes or collars around their neck to put them in this priestly state of mind. So that's about as much as we know about this ephod, but I believe it was to get him in this state of mind. And then he consecrated this household, it's translated household item. We see it in the other version translated as teraphim. So what is a teraphim? Let's look that up in Bible Hub. We're going to see here it's translated as perhaps a household idol. Again, word origin is of uncertain derivation. No one really knows where it came from. No one really knows what it is. We look into some of the lexicon of Brown Driver Briggs. They say it's a kind of idol, something of reverence. It could be a tool used for divination, which is a non religious or non biblical way of making contact with the spiritual realm. You're going to find that this word teraphim and another one called seraphim come up many times in the Bible. And again, we really don't know what they are. They're even used in the temple. The teraphims and seraphims are used to describe some of the images that are in the tabernacle and later on in the temple that Solomon makes. And so again, one of those kind of mysterious things. So he had made a shrine, he had an ephod, he had a teraphim, he had his little molten carved image that he put in. And then he takes one of his sons and says, okay, you're going to be my religious authority in my life. Again, this is really strange, taking a younger son. Obviously, he was younger than he was. He had a few to choose from. There were at least two, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to appoint you being my religious leader." This is all just really, really weird. And we're going to find out really what's going on when we look at verse 6. This kind of sums it up. It says, "In those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes." There is so much packed into this verse 6. Um, Questions we can ask as to, okay, where was the tabernacle? It was still there. It was in Shiloh. Why did it not seem to have any influence on these outlying areas? Where were the priests? What were they doing? Why weren't people going to the tabernacle for their religious rituals and to gain instruction and to grow closer to God? Um, why why was this going on? And then verse 6 says that, well, all these problems exist because there was no king in Israel. Well, God didn't want there to be a king in Israel. Did they think that having a king in Israel was going to solve all their religious problems? Of course, we know because we've read ahead, and we know that when David was king, things were pretty good. But right after that, things kind of fell apart. Even in David's realm, things kind of fell apart. And we see that when there was a king in Israel, that was not a guarantee that everybody was doing the right thing. That was not a guarantee that the whole country was serving God the way they were supposed to. In fact, we kind of see the opposite. If we look at history, we see that when the government has gotten involved in religion, or when religion has kind of taken sides with the government, it was never a positive thing for bringing people closer to God. Um, our history books are filled with things that happened when the religious authorities tried to get together with the politicians and those in government, and compromises were always made. and government always had control and forced people to comply in ways. That was the reason the Pilgrims came to the United States, is because there was a religion that was run by the King of England, and they felt they did not have their freedom of religious liberties, and so they came to the United States seeking those freedoms. And so verse 6 is just a very strange thing. And every man did what was right in his own eyes. And I guess all through time, all through history, we can see that that had some effect and played out in some ways, even maybe in our own society today. We know that things are not the way God wanted them to be. We know that things are definitely take a different path than maybe what God had intended. Um, is the government supposed to be making this right? Or, there's so many questions you can ask, but yet here we seem that people did what was right in their own eyes and didn't follow religious authority, didn't follow the direction of the Bible, and just created each man their own little religion, if you will. And of course, we can see a lot of that happening in our world today. So, wow, with that all, we're gonna kind of close this out with verse 6. Next week we will not be having class because it's the 4th of July holiday. I want you to enjoy, those of you that are taking the week off, and we will reconvene back the following week. So God bless you all. Thanks again for listening, and look forward to seeing you all then. Bye-bye.